So I will tell you more about my journey in the Green Party, I guess, and how extraordinary it is really to be sitting here now. And I was reflecting that I joined the Green Party 30 years ago this year. So I joined in 1986, which seems one hell of a long time ago. And what caused me to join back then was that I'd been involved in a whole set of different issues. So I was very involved in CND. I regularly visited Greenham Common. I didn't live there, but I did go quite often. Went to many other CND events. I was also involved in some parts of the environmental movement, also very involved in the women's movement. And I kind of felt that my life was quite fragmented. You know, one night it would be CND, the next night it would be the environment, the next night it would be something to do with women. And it just didn't feel very focused. And then I read a book that changed my life, and it was by Jonathan Porritt, who is a life member of the Green Party, I'm glad to say. And back in 1984, he wrote a book called Seeing Green, and I read it in 1986. I remember exactly where I was, in a really pitiful little bedsit in Clapham. I was there because I was doing some research for my PhD at the British Library. And I read this book, and what it did, I think, for me was to bring together all of the different things I've been interested in, so the environment and peace and women's issues, and it brought it all together in a coherent whole and really made you look at the economic system, our political system, in a much more rigorous way, and to understand that there are links between a mindset that will lead you to think that nuclear weapons are a reasonable way of solving conflict, and the same kind of mindset that exploits the planet, that exploits each other. And suddenly it really was a kind of a light bulb moment for me. It was kind of showing how all of the different things I was involved in did have some fundamental connections. And what's more, there was a political party out there that recognised that and had a political programme to try to address not just the causes, not just the symptoms, but the causes of the challenges we faced. And I remember turning the book over as I finished it and noticing that it said, the Ecology Party, I think it was still then in 84, was based in the Clapham High Road, and my bedsit was in Clapham, so this was obviously meant to be. So I marched up and down the Clapham High Road looking for what I imagined would be a big office with a plaque on the wall saying, this is the Green Party. And unsurprisingly, in retrospect, I couldn't find it. Eventually, I found a kind of broom cupboard behind a Chinese restaurant, and that indeed was the Green Party office. But I signed up straight away. I said, what can I do to get involved? And I started off as a volunteer in the press office. And then somehow I managed to persuade them that my PhD on the 16th century literary romance, my work on that was going to be just perfect for the requirements of a Green Party press officer. And it was probably because they were offering a pittance of a salary that nobody else, I think, went for the job. So I got it by default. And so I became the Green Party's press officer between 1987 and 1989. Now, if anybody can cast their mind back to that time, it was quite an extraordinary time in British politics, because we had basically the breakup of Labour into the STP, and then we had the collapse of the Liberals, and essentially you'll know that in 1989 the Greens got that phenomenal 15% of the result in the European elections, which I like to claim credit for, but of course it was nothing to do with my being in the press office. It just happened to be at that really exciting time when British politics was in a state of flux, probably not rivaled until the period we're in right now, and I think there probably are some similarities actually between 1989 and where we are now. But it was an extraordinary result, because there we were, the Green Party getting 15% of the result. Now, of course, we didn't have proportional representation for the European elections at that time, so our 15% of the result yielded no seats. But what it did do was to put the Green Party on the map for the very first time, and I think what it did do, many of the environmental groups would say that, in a sense, that vote did more to wake people up to the environment as a political issue than any number of years of campaigning from many NGOs, important though that is. And I think it is true to say from that point on, no serious political party would pretend that the environment wasn't a political issue. I can't say that they put policies in their manifestos that were commensurate to the size of the challenge, but they did realise that it wasn't good enough to say we don't think the environment's important. They at least went through the motions of that. So fast forwarding a little bit, you'll be very pleased to know I'm not going to go through all of those 30 years between 1986 and today, but fast forwarding a little bit, I stood for what was then Green Party Council, and you can't be an employee of the party and an executive member, quite rightly so. So I gave up being the press officer for the Green Party. I moved to Oxford. I started work at Oxfam in their press office, sat on Green Party Council, and started to fight elections in Oxford. And in 1993, I became the first Green councillor in Oxfordshire. And what I would say about that, and what I would say about every election campaign I've been involved in, it's just been such a team effort that you can't possibly do any of these things alone, and having a fantastic team around you is absolutely the most critical thing to any kind of success, I think. So that was the beginning of really building up a presence in Oxford. The year after I was elected to the county council, Mike Woodin, people who I hope will remember Mike Woodin, an absolutely extraordinary member of the Green Party, who very, very sadly died prematurely from lung cancer at the age of 38, which was just one of the biggest tragedies I think the Green Party would have had, because I think if he was still with us, I just feel sure he would be an MP, he would be probably Prime Minister by now. He was a very special person. But he became the city councillor in Oxford after that, and the rest is history. Lots more councillors got elected at county and city level in Oxford. 1999, moving on, European elections of that year. This country had come under pressure from the rest of the EU to say that the electoral system we were using for the European elections had to come in line with the rest of the EU. It should be a proportional system. And so that meant that in 1999, that was the first time we contested European elections under proportional representation. And at that time, Jean Lambert was elected for London, and I was elected for the South East. And again, I mean, I can probably only thank so many people that might well be in this room now for all of the support they gave to the European election campaign across the South East. Again, a fantastic joint effort. 2010 was the opportunity to stand for Westminster. And again, looking at what had been happening in Brighton, I was more closely involved with what was happening in Oxford, but as Keith will know, what was happening down in Brighton was quite extraordinary as well. First of all, Pete West being elected. When was he elected? 96?
Yeah, 96.
Yeah, 96. And he was the first councillor in Brighton, and very shortly afterwards joined by Keith. And between them, they just built the Brighton Green Party, Brighton and Hove Green Party, which was a fantastic achievement. Keith in 2005 got 22% of the vote, I think, which was amazing. And so building on incredible foundations laid by both Keith and Pete, I stood in 2010. And again, you'll know that what made that possible and what made winning possible was the fact that the whole of the Green Party, of the whole of Green Party of England and Wales, and actually the Scottish Green Party too, prioritised winning that seat. And you know, one of the themes I'm sure over this weekend will be the importance of targeting to win. And we certainly did target Brighton, and thanks to all those other constituencies that might have felt, I want a bit of money for my campaign, and you know, perhaps some people felt that it was unduly being sucked down to Brighton, but I promise you we made very good use of it, and just getting the first MP elected, I think, was just so important for the Green Party to kind of show that we were serious about being at Westminster too, because you'll know that our media, our whole political system is so focused on Westminster that unless you've got some presence there, then it's very hard to be taken as seriously as we deserve. So in all of that, I would just reflecting on successful election campaigns, it is about building that incredibly effective team around you, and also about having some fun, and that might sound a bit flippant, but it isn't, because election campaigns, as you know, are about year-long campaigning. They are exhausting, and you know, in terms of keeping up your energy levels, and you know, when you get knocked back, that sense of how do you come back again, then the only way you can do it is if you make what you're doing enjoyable as well as, you know, important and something that you put a lot of hours in. And I just think, you know, for all of our local parties, thinking more about how we can involve social events. I mean, things like this, you know, how nice is it to be here rather than in a windowless meeting room somewhere else, is just so crucial to success. And I think that sense of resilience is about having good people around you, and that teamwork is just it's not just for the work that you do in a council chamber, let's say. I remember when I was elected first to Oxfordshire County Council, I had a 3-month-old son, and that wasn't easy. But the kind of support I got from the local party was, you know, people bringing food round to the house, people looking after the baby because Oxfordshire County Council didn't have a creche. I mean, far from it. In fact, they ejected me from the council for bringing the council into disrepute for breastfeeding. That's where we were in 1993. So literally, Sushila Dal, who became the second councillor of the county council in a by-election, and Deborah Woodin, who was Mike Woodin's wife, they between them literally held the baby outside the council room, made the food, helped me with casework. And I think, sometimes it can be quite daunting thinking about standing for council, particularly if it's in an area where there aren't yet any councillors. And if you're not in a position to stand yourself, but you still think it's a really important thing to do, then just thinking about how you can help someone who is willing to stand for a winnable seat. And that help doesn't have to be, just poring over the minutes of meetings, important though that is. There's a whole range of ways that we can make it more possible for each other to be able to stand for election.